Well, I think we're live. I had a false start about 2 minutes ago, so I am blaming that on Mercury retrograde. And this seems to be a particularly bad one. Okay, let's assume that we're live and let's get going. News flash, hot off the press. Past life regression is not like a set of spandex pants. One size doesn't fit all. Hello, all. Dr. Bruce here, welcoming you to yet another episode of the Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond. You know, there's a boatload of misinformation, what do I call it, disinformation surrounding past life regression, which really confuses the heck out of people. It really does. So tonight, I'm going to try to clear up some of that confusion. And let's dive right in, because there's a lot of ground to cover. People come for past life regression for a variety of reasons. So naturally, the therapist should tailor the session to reflect the client's reason for coming. Unfortunately, many don't. Every client gets the same old tired approach. I've delineated 4 different types of past life regression for you. While they all have certain elements in common, there are overlaps. They are each done for different purposes. So let's take a look at them. And the first is the Joe Friday session. Okay, you got me there. That really isn't the type of, or the name of a type of session. I made it up. But I did so for a good reason. You know, those of you who I guess I would call of a certain age know that Joe Friday was the character on a famous and influential uh, TV police drama. Probably one of the most famous ones in media history. It was called Dragnet. His famous catchphrase was, some of you guys out there know this one, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Now, many people seek out a past life regression out of simple curiosity. They want to know the facts. In other words, things like, who was I? Where was I? When was I? What was my name? When and where did I live? What did I do? What did I experience during that lifetime? How did I live? How did I die? What did I do? What kind of occupation did I partake of? And so on. This is the best type of regression for gathering information that is historically verifiable in terms of accuracy and veracity. On the other hand, some people want to become aware of the intricate associations between a particular past life and the current one. They want to know how a past life influences the present one. Now, this session is kind of a well balanced one because it actually does both, but it leans a little more toward fact finding. For those interested in gathering and potentially verifying information, certain past experiences can be pieced together with great detail, producing names, dates, places. These details can then be researched and authenticated or disproved, as the case may be. This isn't to say that such verifiable and researchable details will not be obtained in other types of past life regression sessions. They actually can, and they do. But that informational session is more specifically oriented to those types of details. Now, some of the details derived from this type of session can be relatively boring. Yes, they can. And frankly, we want it to be boring. Because the reason that I want it to be boring is because unless you happen to be Cleopatra or Napoleon or Julius Caesar, and I haven't had that happen yet in almost 50 years of doing these, that's what life's been like for thousands of years. Pretty damn boring. So we look at such things like eating utensils, money, food, clothing, types of architecture, how they might have traveled. Did they travel by foot, horse, carriage, automobile, train, plane, so on? The small details of life. And virtually all of my clients find this very useful because the problem is not getting hypnotized, or not that they didn't have a past life. The problem is the subject believing what they come up with. However, when the subject receives a recording of this session, or they immediately jot down the details and concrete data, now they have at their fingertips something which can be researched. They can go online and Google it. They'll be able to take this information do some research on the web or in books, encyclopedias, and possibly verify it. For the most part, we look at boring details here because those are the ones that are most readily and easily researchable. Did they wear that kind of shoe in that particular time and place they saw themselves in? Did the money that they saw look like the money that was used then? And if so, could they have seen it in a movie? Did people travel in those types of conveyances then? A general informational session or type of regression is designed to give the client some rationale and a rational basis for possibly deciding whether or not what they experienced was just another dream or fantasy trip or really represented an actual past life. Give an example of one. A male client of mine told about a life that he lived as a female ranch owner in the Arizona Territory, what was then the territory of the American Old West back in the 1890s. And she was cheated out of a large portion of her land by both a bank and a railroad company looking to use her land for its tracks. During the regression, he or she was able to relate to me the name, details of their family, the details of the life then, the name of the nearby town, which no longer exists, by the way, to which he, as a woman, would go to pick up supplies. The names of both the banker and the railroad representative who had engineered that takeover of the property, and other pretty significant details, which, upon research and investigation, were verified. While not the primary thrust of the session, we also look at potential associations between a particular past life and the current one. And even those clients who are primarily looking for verifiable information are interested in knowing how situation and events in a past life might influence the current one. Now, the second type of past life regression is the karmic connection session. It's also known as the karmic counterpart. That's where we do examine the past life that is most directly responsible for the current lifetime, or more accurately, what's going on currently in the client's life. We then explore the specific connections between the two. These connections might include relationships like relatives, spouses, significant others, friends, coworkers, talents, abilities, likes and dislikes, hobbies, careers. A karmic connection session is a journey to the origin of one's current personality. That's where we look at that past life which is most directly responsible for the present lifetime, or more specifically, what's currently happening in the present lifetime. You see, those who embrace reincarnation believe that the important people in our life can usually be found as other identities in one or more prior incarnations. It's known as our soul group. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard that word. Sometimes it's called a soul tribe. A soul group is made up of souls who regularly incarnate together and with whom we have spent the majority of time within the spirit world, or the time between time frame between lives. While we're on the other side, and some refer to it as home, we make agreements with other members of our soul group to meet at some juncture in our earthbound lives for joint exploration or to fulfill a specific purposes, to live out our soul contracts. Soul groups will often be born in similar circumstances at relatively the same time and may or may not come to actually know each other in a specific lifetime. There will be life experiences where these individuals will cross paths. Sometimes it's very intense, very involved, as in the case with soulmates. At other times, it'd be just like passing through each other's lives, but leaving a great impact on one another. And in other lifetimes, it'll be like those proverbial two ships passing in the night. But they're usually working in concert, whether they're aware of it or not. A soul group can be the family that you're born into, or a group of friends that you develop, or a similar group of coworkers, and they can manifest in several ways. For instance, the same person who was your husband, let's say, in a past life, might return as your wife, your son, daughter, mother, father, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, friend, foe, or, heaven help us, mother-in-law in another life. If you remember, we said that a karmic connection is where we examine the past life that is most directly responsible for the present lifetime, or more specifically, what's currently going on in the client's life. So as such, a karmic connection session may lead to a different lifetime than the one that was conducted with the same client, or is conducted with the same client, let's say 6 months or a year from now. Also, it may not necessarily lead us to the last life lived in a chronological or even linear sense. For example, you might have been born in this life in the 1970s, and perhaps you led a prior life in the 1800s, early 1900s, whatever. But the life most directly influencing pertinent areas at this particular time in your life could be one that you might have lived in the 1500s. So we then explore the specific connections between the two lives. These connections may include relationships like your relatives, spouses, friends, co-workers, talents, abilities, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and careers. Next is a very popular one. It's called the Between Lives Regression. You'll also hear it called as Life Between Lives Regression. And that's both an extension of and an evolution beyond past life regression. It's an outgrowth of those near-death experiences which first shot into the limelight in the 1970s after the publication of Dr. Raymond Moody's best-selling book, Life After Life. Dr. Joel Whitman and Joe Fisher further explored this phenomenon in Life Between Life, and that was published in 1986. But it gained its greatest prominence beginning in 2002 with the publication of Journey of Souls by the late Dr. Michael Newton, who co-authored several more books on the subject, and he's the one who coined the term Life Between Lives hypnosis. For some, this is the ultimate afterlife adventure. Now, this procedure, also called spiritual regression, is a trip to the period between one's death and their immediate past incarnation and their birth into this, their current life. Among other things, the subject meets their soul companions and guides, undergoes a life review, and learns their purpose in this lifetime. Now, proponents of this type of regression believe that it permits the subject to connect with their, for want of a better term, let's call them soul self. And that way, they're able to bridge their physical incarnations and connect with a more permanent, immortal life in the spirit world. Some even liken it to a facilitated near-death experience because while not as vivid and intense, it does bear some resemblance, sometimes remarkably so, to an NDE. Regular past life regression is a powerful tool that can be, depending upon the type, help us understand the past, gain insight into our present lives, understand the root causes of our current problems, and help us find answers to questions that might have been troubling us for a long time. But for some, a between lives regression can be an even more profound experience as it allows us to connect with our higher selves, our guides, and our loved ones who have passed on. It can provide us with guidance and insight that can help us navigate those challenges of our current lives and give us a sense of peace and understanding that can be difficult to find elsewhere. It can be deeply transformative as it allows us to do a variety of different things. You know, one of my clients wrote me and said, I have had sessions with Dr. Bruce Kaloski, and I've gotten a much deeper perspective on life after death. But seeing my soul living in previous lives was fascinating, but the between lives was a phenomenal experience. Even if you know a lot about past lives in general, she wrote, the in-between life session really helps connect the dots. I highly recommend it. And that statement, helps connect the dots, pretty much explains it all. Structurally, a between lives regression is different than the informational and karmic connection sessions. First, it takes a person into the lifetime directly prior to this, their current lifetime. We conduct a brief overview of that life, and then we make a transition or we use it as a segue into the time period between lives. Kind of like getting two sessions in one when you think about it. Now, when I say that the person is taken back to the lifetime directly prior to this, their current one, it doesn't necessarily mean that if, for instance, the client was born in 1970, and they also lived in the 1800s, but also lived in the 1800s, early 1900s, that was necessarily the last lifetime they lived in a chronological or linear sense. Time-wise, we tend to think of reincarnation in a progressive sense. In other words, linear. We perceive our reincarnations as a series of lives lived chronologically, one directly after another. In other words, if we led a life in the 15th century, the next life we lead, this might be in the 16th century. After that, in the 17th century, so on and so forth. But is this in fact so? Or does it need to be so? An area of quantum physics, which I spoke about in a previous slide, suggests that there are levels of reality at which our everyday concepts of time break down. Some theories about reincarnation take this into account. They assert that in actuality, all of our lives, past, present, future, are occurring simultaneously. So it may turn out that the apparent sequentiality of past lives is just an illusion, a result of the limits of our current perceptions. This enables us to focus on how the events in the between life stage influence and correspond to what's happening in our present lifetime, and not necessarily in a chronological sense the one lived prior to this one. Remember, even though we do a brief overview of that life, its main purpose is to serve as a gateway to the between life stage. So with this in mind, as I discuss events of the afterlife with my client, it will be from the perspective of how these events relate to their current lifetime. For example, when I have them reunite with their soul group, which I do, it will, for the most part, be with members whose earth identity they recognize from their current lifetime. When I take them before the Council of Elders, which we'll talk about in a little while, their discussion with the Council, for the most part, will reflect on how they are progressing in this lifetime. And most questions they ask the elders will be pertinent to this lifetime. There are a number of different experiences within a between lives regression that really distinguish it from the more tightly structured informational session or the karmic connection session. By their very nature, these types allow the facilitator to be more directive, and it lets me exert more control, kind of like a film director directing a movie. Even allowing for a difference in details, lifetimes generally have the same sequence of events. Let's face it, we're born, we have a childhood, an adolescence, an adulthood, some sort of education, a career, personal relationships, a family, and then we die. In the between lives regression, while these experiences vary widely from client to client, in general, these experiences may include, in one form or another, meeting their spirit guide or the guide or guides, a life review, or what's called a debriefing, a reunion with the soul group, at least one, sometimes two or more meetings with the Council of Elders, varied activities within the afterlife, life planning, also known as pre-birth planning, and then birth into the current life. These experiences are not always in the order that I just mentioned, although they could be. I realize that some of you may not be familiar with some of these concepts. So let's take a look at them. First, spirit guides. In the metaphysical sense, the spirit guides are thought to be non-physical beings who have a unique connection to us, with an individual. And they often refer to us as their charge. They're said to exist in the spiritual realm, and they serve as advisors, protectors, and helpers to those in need of guidance. I want you to think guardian angels here. Spirit guides are believed to be with an individual throughout their entire lifetime. They offer support and direction as the individual navigates their earthly journey. According to some metaphysical beliefs, these guides can communicate with us through inner thoughts, intuition, gut feelings, or even signs and symbols that we might encounter in our daily lives. Now, it's important to note spirit guides are believed to respect free will. They will not interfere with an individual's choices or actions. Instead, what they do is they offer quiet background guidance and support. Okay, let's move on. In the metaphysical sense, the Council of Elders refers to a group of wise and highly evolved spirits who are believed to guide our soul journey over many lifetimes. They no longer reincarnate. They've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. They're said to be composed of individuals or entities who possess an advanced level of spiritual development. And you'll hear them oftentimes referred to as ascended masters. Um, Many have reported that they are the most advanced entities a soul, such as us, can still incarnate on Earth, can see or meet in the spirit world. Various names are used to describe them. They're called the Council of Elders, the Old Ones, the Wise Ones, Sacred Masters, Venerables, Examiners, and the Committee. Now, whatever the name is, descriptions of these Council of Elders does follow a recurring pattern. Subjects who have undergone between lives regression usually report that the council visit almost always takes place soon after completing an incarnation on Earth, although not necessarily immediately on crossing over. Many also report visiting the council a second time, just prior to rebirth. As with most of between life activities, there's no hard and fast spiritual rules of procedure that are connected to the timing of council visits. And believe me, in all cases, the afterlife seems to be anything but routine. Now understand, the council is not a tribunal which is designed to judge and punish. Rather, it features a group of highly evolved, patient, loving spirits who guide and assist other souls, offering unbiased and loving guidance to all souls as long as they continue to incarnate. During these meetings, key life choices are reviewed. They're discussed. The council reviews our life and helps us understand its significance to the grand scheme of things. It's also believed that they help us identify areas where we need to learn and grow in our next incarnation, which leads us to pre-birth planning. And no, I'm not referring to deciding on the wallpaper pattern for Junior's room. What I'm referring to is life planning that takes place in the time frame between lives as we prepare for the current incarnation. You know, many of us have had the experience of preparing for a vacation or a trip by thoroughly researching our destination, our method of travel, planning our trip down to the most minute details. We plan all the stops we're going to make along the way, the hotels we're going to stay in, the sites we're going to see, even the food we're going to eat. We might even engage the services of a travel agent to help us. And then there are times when our planning is minimal. We might decide to wing it, go wherever the four winds take us. We forego careful preparation in favor of spontaneity. Of course, I guess spontaneity in its own way is often a plan. Much the same situation appears to take place in the time period between lives as we prepare for our upcoming incarnation. Now, as is the topic of reincarnation itself, what happens between lives is largely a matter of speculation, varying opinions and interpretation of the results of the data accumulated by investigators and researchers in the field. But they generally agree on 2 points regarding pre-birth planning. 1, only key events appear to be pre-planned. Things that seem to a human, from our perspective, might be of no consequence from the soul's perspective. Conversely, minor occurrences, at least from an earthly human viewpoint, may be planned since they may actually be quite important for the soul's development. And number 2, once incarnated, people have free will. They sometimes choose to create events that weren't part of the plan, were not designed on the soul level. You know, kind of like like an actor may opt to improvise at points in a play or a show or a movie instead of following the script. The major area of disagreement on the issue of pre-birth planning seems to center on whether or not we plan our incarnations, not on whether we plan our incarnations, but the extent to which we plan it, and whether it's done with the assistance of guides or counselors. And if so, what is the extent of that assistance? Are we given free rein or are we strongly pressured? Do we get the screws into accepting the blueprint of our upcoming life? Since we apparently lead hundreds, if not thousands, of lives, with each life having the capability of being drastically different from a former life, both views may be correct at different times and different incarnations. It generally assumed that, among other things, pre-birth planning allows us the opportunity to map out our destiny, to set objectives, and arrange to meet up with certain souls to assist us in fulfilling that particular destiny or soul objective. This doesn't mean that every little detail is predestined, because there's no guarantee others are going to follow their roles in our lives. My own view, this is my opinion, is that a coming life is not predestined or fixed in detail. I feel that most pre-planning by the soul consists of likelihoods. That is, events aren't set up as completely predetermined, but they exist more as potentialities or probabilities. Generalities seem to be the case. General outlines, general developments, general challenges. Apparently, there's a lot left to chance and improvisation. The prevailing, some would say classic view, is that at some point in the between life state, we, as our soul, sit down at that big conference table in the sky to write the script for our next lifetime. And here we get to choose our sex, appearance, race, nationality, career, areas of interest, talents, goals, objectives. Some would also add the time period that we're going to reincarnate into, among other things. Sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Well, don't worry, we're not alone. There's plenty of help available should we choose to accept it. With us when we're planning our coming incarnations, there are usually many members of our soul group, which are, of course, the individuals who have been with us in previous lifetimes. Some say that the members of the council sit in on our planning, and of course our soul guide, a spirit guide. This is where we enter into soul contracts. Simply put, a soul contract is a pre-birth agreement between two or more souls entered into for karmic reasons. That is, what do they want to do together in the future incarnations? How will they help each other or teach each other some life lessons, or challenge each other in certain areas, so on and so forth. But always with the goal of soul growth, both ours and theirs in mind. Together we plan when and where we're going to meet. We build in obstacles, wondrous synchronicities to keep things interesting and exciting. We decide on gifts, talents, grand adventures, but we also carefully plan difficulties and challenges for our individual personalities. We explore whether we're going to take on the role of friend, lover, family, teacher, employer, employee, teammate, or even adversary this time around. And just to keep things interesting and exciting, there's a built-in escape clause. We give our incarnated personality the free will privilege of opting out of any agreement at any time. Maybe with karmic consequences, maybe not. It all depends on how and why we make our choices. You know, in the words of the Scottish poet Robert Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men gang aft the gley, which means that plans often go awry. Our best made plans and goals don't always work out in life, and neither do those made in the great beyond. Soul agreements are often renegotiated, and life goals are often reevaluated behind the scenes throughout a lifetime to adjust to situations which disrupt the original ideological scenarios. Change can and does occur. The soul's emphasis may shift. Goals may be reached sooner than were expected. Major world events may disrupt our plans, and so on and so forth. Now, using the analogy of a road trip, we could take the interstate, get there more quickly, or we might decide to take and travel the back roads to enjoy the scenery at a more leisurely pace and avoid stressful traffic. It's also very much like a movie called My Life, with you as the producer, director, and screenwriter. Sometimes revisions are made while filming is taking place. You get to decide whether your life is more like a Greek tragedy, a slapstick comedy, quirky melodrama, or exciting action adventure. Now, it's important to note that these beliefs and views on the afterlife may widely vary across different cultures, religions, and spiritual practices. Now it's on to the fourth and last type of past life regression session, past life therapy. Simply put, past life therapy is targeted past life regression used for emotional, spiritual, and sometimes physical healing. And targeted is the operative word here. When it's properly administered, past life therapy is a type of session which will produce the most profound, tangible, identifiable change in an individual. The other types of sessions give us information, outer insight, and understanding. Past life therapy also gives us information, insight, and understanding. But it takes the process one step further and actively works to produce a dynamic and often dramatic and specific change in an individual's condition or their behavior. For several decades now, an increasing number of therapists, both mainstream and alternative, have found that a host of human ills are treatable through past life regression. They include fears and phobias, eating disorders, alcoholism, drug addiction, allergies, asthma, depression, fears, phobias, obsessive compulsive disorders, psychosomatic pain, relationship problems, sexual dysfunctions, even financial issues. The list goes on and on. So to reiterate, past life therapy, or PLT for short, is past life regression used for emotional, situation, and sometimes physical healing. Actually, past life therapy is an umbrella term that encompasses a wide range of techniques, procedures, and experiences. Different therapists do it in different ways. Past life therapy is predicated on the theory that our character today represents a culmination of all the experiences we've had over numerous lifetimes. These past life events affect many aspects of our behavior. In some cases, past life emotional or physical trauma can cause psychological or physical problems. And these can resist cure through conventional medical or psychological treatment. Past life therapy can release the influence of these repressed thoughts, these events or emotions or situations, and bring about a beneficial change. Now, I remember one woman I worked with who complained that she always felt like a sword of Damocles was hanging over her. She went through life with a vague and irrational fear that something dreadful was about to happen. Well, when things were going well, and she was happy, she started waiting for the other shoe to fall. She was Murphy's Law taken to the extreme. I regressed her to a life in which she was a much-loved only child. She was a real daddy's girl. She was given a horse for her birthday. She was ecstatically happy. One day she jumped onto a horse, scared it, it bolted, and she was thrown and killed. Asked what connection this had with her present life, she said that whenever she was happy, she would start to worry. There was always a vague sense of dread. You see, she always associated being happy with fear and eventual loss. Her having been killed in a moment of utter happiness in the other life made sense of that fear in this life. There's one woman whose lifelong dread of water kept her from swimming. She went back to a recent past life where she drowned in a fast-flowing river. And she lost her two young children when the boat they were in capsized. After feeling the terrible pain of this loss, not only her life, but her children's as well, she moved forward to experience her death. And the decision she made at the time of her death was, "I'll never go in the water again." And she didn't until we worked together. The list goes on and on. Past life therapy has been proven itself most effective method of therapy. But see, many people assume that the problems of a current life have a direct causal relationship with the last life that they chronologically lived. Not necessarily so. Our most immediate past life might have been in the earlier 20th century, for example, but certain issues and challenges we're facing might have had our genesis in a life that we lived in, say, medieval Europe. One theory, and this is a fascinating one, very intriguing, we broached it earlier, holds that far from being frozen in a linear sequence of time, our past lives are actually occurring simultaneously. And it's only our belief system that the past is frozen and unalterable that keeps us from realizing this. And realizing that at an unconscious level, we are communicating with our past and maybe even future selves all at the same time. So, in this paradigm, past lives would more appropriately be called adjacent lives. And the life that's affecting us most at any given moment may not be our most recent incarnation, but any one of a multitude of existences, no matter how remote they may be. Let me give you an analogy. This is a good one that helps you can help you wrap your head around this. Let's say we have a roll of pennies, and each has a different consecutive date from 1800 to 2025. They're all stacked in chronological order. Someone walks by and knocks over the stack. The coins roll and they scatter, eventually come to rest everywhere, on top of each other, next to one another. Heads up, heads down. 1896 might be right next to 1930. 1815 may lie on top of 1964. 1918 may have rolled under the dresser, never to be heard from or seen again. So it is with our lives, our incarnations. The subconscious mind, or the superconscious mind, or the universal mind, or God, or whoever, whatever you want to call it, is constantly rattling the spare change in its pockets. And so your present life is constantly coming into contact with past and maybe future lives that may be quite distant in terms of chronological term, but extraordinarily close in terms of their psychological presence. It's when two of these coins, or past lives, stick together that problems surface, just such as those that come up during a past life regression. But by realizing that we can park next to any past or adjacent life that we choose, we can access positive or negative past life influences and experiences. Well, that about does it for tonight's show. But a couple of things before I close. First of all, you just heard me discuss 4 different types of past life regression. If any of you out there are interested in trying out one of these past life regressions in a private session with me, this month I offered a $100 discount to all members of my group. This is almost the end of the month, so I'm going to extend that to you through the first week of next month. So if anyone would like to experience any of these, I offer first a free consultation. So you can contact me through my email, which you'll see in the comments section, or you can drop me direct message on my messenger. Okay. Now, as far as for our next show, one of my dearest friends, and also one of the most popular people I've interviewed on this show, because I have interviewed some other people, but she's a very popular one, is Dr. Toni Riley, who is a past life regression practitioner from down under. She's from Brisbane, Australia. And I'm going to have Toni as a guest on my next show, where we're going to have a very deep discussion about death, suicide, and about the topic of grief. Toni is a master at introducing perspectives about certain topics that challenge widespread belief, and I know she won't disappoint. I don't have a firm date in mind yet for that one because I still have to coordinate with Dr. Tony about this. So I'll be letting you know in the next few days. I'll also be having some more. I'll publish some more details about that particular topic. So I want to thank you all for tuning in to the Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond. And until next time, and as always, happy hitchhiking and happy trails.